All right, I was really behind schedule on, so the normal lead up that happens like a minute or two gone. So hopefully everybody's here on time. I will give everybody a few minutes to join the party since I know I go live the process depending on what part of the country you're in. You decide how you prefer to pronounce that word. I always like to mix it up. Audio a tad low today. Allow me. Turn it up. There you go. Is that better? Also, it's a new mic. New mic right here. This is supposedly a better mic, so I'm learning what I need to do to make it better. I don't want to yell. Look at that. Yes. Yeah. Oh, my other mic's downstairs. So I've been adjusting mics. One of the things that's been happening, been evolving in our house. I guess I'll just keep the microphone even closer. Bob would yell at me. Bob gets mad when the microphone's like right at my face. So, but we'll go with it. Yes. So you are a connoisseur of mics. I only know the one that we bought. So let's see. When Bob and I first decided to invest in sound equipment for our podcast, I had no idea. I still have no idea what I'm doing. But I had a friend that I worked with that was very audio engineering proficient. So he basically said, buy this, and buy this. So I bought those things. And over the past however many years since we spent on that money, I've been slowly learning a little bit more. So I have learned more, and this microphone, the SM7B, is widely stated as the best mic you can get, and it was about the same price as the mic I had bought before. So I decided to buy it and give it a shot. So here we are. So now I'm learning to adjust with it. Trying to talk at the right volumes, get everybody to hear the things, but also not be too quiet. It's like a magical thing that people do, and there's like jobs around. I'm an audio engineer, and I make sure you sound right all the time. And it's difficult with Bob, because if you've ever watched a podcast with Bob, sometimes we stream them. Bob is he's like a bobblehead. He's all over. He's here, he's close, he's way over here, and like actually that exaggerate all of the movements that I just did, and that's Bob. So thank you, Technobabble. Got a little support and adjustment there from Sinon. Yes, I'm saying it appropriately these days after asking, because I kept avoiding saying your name, but I don't avoid it anymore. Now I welcome it. Now I say it too often. Oh gosh. Okay, so we've got a good steady flow of folks coming in. I was stumped for a topic for the day. I had no idea. Luckily, some intrepid viewers jumped into Discord and said, "Hey, what are you talking about?" And I had no idea. I threatened a staring contest with everybody. Not really fair, since I would just declare victory and assume that everybody blinked. So I didn't know what to go. Then VA Agile came in and suggested talking about planning and my views of planning, and that gets my blood boiling. That's one of those things that I get pretty passionate about, and just wanted to share my thoughts and views with everyone, and then get some feedback from you guys on how you see it, what you think could be adjusted, what you don't like, what you do like. I would just be interested. Planning shouldn't make blood boil. I guess blood boiling was the wrong term. It got my juices flowing. Planning is one of those things that I am passionate about because in so many places it makes blood boil. It's harder than it should be. It's painful. It's annoying. Yet you have to do it. Otherwise, you're just wandering the wilderness and you might never actually build anything. So, what I've attempted to do over the years is reduce the pain in planning because I hate it. So I've tried to break it down in pieces and make it as consumable, and I don't like long planning sessions. I think part of it is my overall attention span. I think that's I think that's a significant part of it. That one of the things that drove me away from the traditional safe big room planning approach is those are like 2 day sessions. So if you follow the true safe rules, you end up in this multi-day planning session once a quarter. I just imagine myself in those meetings and my head exploding and just wanting to run out of there. So I decided to tweak that and find things that worked for my mental state. I was probably too focused on that, but also giving the teams just a comfort with planning that they didn't feel like it was going to be a slugfest and lose energy halfway through the process. So then the back end of the planning is terrible because everybody just wants to get out of there, right? Like that's not a good situation for such an important thing. Okay, so let us dig into this. This is I'm going to pull up a set of slides that I've used for a couple of talks. Oh, now we're talking. FF, is that a color? Is that like an RGB code? Okay, I'm going to flip over to some slides. Oh, VA Agile. I would be one of those people. I would be out. So FF 51152. Firefighter. There you go. That makes sense. All right, so I'm just going to refer to you as firefighter from now on, if that's okay. Oh, snap. An OG is in the house. Lori Blue. Okay, so firefighter, that is the eternal battle. And I'll talk you through my thoughts and views and ambitions and all these things. This is, let me switch scenes here. Okay, let me make it bigger so it fits. That. There we go. Okay. So this is the guiding principle that I try and do all things with. I admittedly stole it from Spotify. This is something that they professed a long, long time ago, that they use this to help guide the decisions that they make about the process. And this is something that I try and do personally, and I try and coach teams to do as well. And really the goal with minimum viable bureaucracy is to have the least amount of process needed to solve the problem. And one of your goals with that is to have this magical balance of enabling the teams to have autonomy to do the thing. So the developers in the situation that you talked about, they aspire to have the autonomy to build the things as they see, as they understand. But a key is that you have to have alignment on what we're building and why we're building, and often how we're building it, to ensure that it gets built well and is reusable and all of the important things that are out there. So MVB is the one thing that not many people talk about, but that's a guiding principle for me. So in my planning for planning, this is the thing that I strive to have. Let's have the least amount of process that's needed to solve the problem. Now, so often, one of the biggest problems that people have is that they aren't even paying attention to the problem that they have. They're trying to solve problems that don't exist yet with good intent. They have good reasoning, They have good thoughts, they have good ideas, but they don't actually have that problem. So that's one thing, is always give yourself that check on, do we actually have this problem right now? And I would venture a guess that more than half of the things you're trying to solve for aren't actually problems yet. Doesn't mean they won't be problems. But the issue is that oftentimes in trying to solve that problem right now, you end up creating more problems because you don't actually have it. People get frustrated, you have too much process, and things just get annoying and difficult. So let me scroll way down. I'm sorry if this hurts eyes. I'm going to go fast. Okay. So this is when I was at Dude Solutions, and it's backwards. I'm sorry. Hold on, can I make this even bigger? Page. I'll make it a little bigger. Oh, dang it. My head's in the way. Okay, we're going to do this. Bear with me for a second, folks. That just died. So you can see that. All right. So it's backwards. I'm sorry. You normally think it's left to right, but in actuality, it's right to left. So I have an approach that I call the 3 horizons of planning. So you and your team should always have these 3 different horizons when you're planning. You should have consistent view and understanding of what they are and where you're going and where you live within them. On the left side, that's your traditional Scrum board. So that's your sprint plan. That's everything that you're doing. That's the stuff that's coming up, the stuff that's in progress, the stuff that's done, all of those processes that you have in place. This next board with the blue tape, that's what I have historically called the PSI board or the PI board or the BRP board. It's your traditional safe big room planning board, potentially shippable increment, PI, all of the different labels are out there. What I do is that we forecast out the next 6 sprints. I'm very focused on using the word forecast. I treat this as a forecast. This is not an estimate. This is not a plan. This is what we think we can do over the next 6 sprints. The one key difference that I do that is different than what SAFE would suggest you do is they create this forecast once a quarter. They get in, they have this big room planning for multiple days, and everybody does all this magic work, which I believe I'm incapable of doing. And I knew it was going to change. Like I knew there was no way that the stuff. So let's say this left side is the first sprint of January. Hey, guess what? It's 6 sprints, and 6 2-week sprints is about a quarter. This 6th sprint that's way out there, that's a quarter away from where you're at right now. I'm going to venture a guess that you're going to discover a whole lot of things about the work you want to do 6 sprints from now over the previous 5 sprints to that. And you might want to adjust your forecast. So we actually reforecast this BRP, PSI, PI board. I'm going to call it BRP board right now. We reforecast this BRP board once a month. I found that reforecasting it that often does one magical thing. It allows teams to incrementally break down work so that when it comes time for the work to come off of this BRP board and onto their sprint board, they've seen it multiple times. They've discussed it, they've planned it, they've done all of the spikes they need to do the research. So that way, when it comes on and it becomes, I know, sorry about the acronyms, when it becomes a part of the sprint plan, it's not the first time they've seen it. And that's where I see so many teams struggle, is that when it's time to start working on it, they just start breaking it down. So I've seen real success having stories start to appear 6 sprints from now. Then 2 sprints later, you've already seen it. You've talked about it. You start to break it down into large chunks. You start to break it down even further. You start to really understand what it is you need to build. You have an idea of how you're going to build it. You've done the research. You have the architectural work in place so that by the time it hits your sprint board, your sprint horizon, you know what the heck you're building. You know how you're going to build it, and it just gets down to execution. So many times, so many teams, all of their discovery happens in sprint planning. When you do this well, sprint planning is a non-event. Sprint planning is, what's going on? Oh, yeah, this is the new cat. Sorry, taking a break. This is Bronte. That was my wife's Christmas gift. There had been a request for multiple cats. I'm married to a crazy cat lady. We have one cat. And there was a push for multiple cats, and I felt like it was this floodgate. Like, as soon as you go to 2 cats, what's going to stop you from being 6, 7, 8, 25 cats? So I fought and fought and fought. But in the end, as we got down to what would make my wife the happiest for Christmas, it was another cat. And success. He cried. I win. Yes. So I knew I nailed it. Okay. So the number one challenge, yes, you are correct. I am paying for it ever since, because the cat's crazy, like most cats. And it's a kitten, right? So he likes to be everywhere and do everything. But wife is happy. Kids are happy. So dad wins. Okay, so back to the planning situation. The biggest challenge that I see with teams is that they end up doing what I call just-in-time planning. So they are planning work as it's coming into the sprint. Sprint planning sessions take like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, because you're having to break down this work that you're trying to jam into the next sprint. And guess what? I bet your sprints aren't very predictable. I found that the best way to get your sprints to be predictable is to have well thought out work about what you're doing. So let's talk through an epic that you start to break down. And we'll just use it as this leftmost side of the BRP board is January 1st. So that's like the first sprint of the year. And you do this in a continuous flow, so that way you aren't jamming all this in at once. Those stories that start to, or those epics, maybe they are stories that the product owner brings and sets in front of the team. They're 6 sprints out. But the key is that you start talking about them. You start to break them down into smaller pieces. You start to figure out how we're going to build things. And what you'll see is that you'll recognize that these later sprints, either there's nothing there because they didn't get to it, or there's just a couple of stickies there. Then what you'll see is the closer we get to now, those sprints are pretty darn packed because they've had an opportunity through this monthly BRP planning process to discuss and break them down. In this BRP process, you don't really need to talk about the next sprint because you've already talked about that work 2, maybe 3 times. So that's a key. And what you will notice is that these top 2 rows, those are from the most experienced teams that we had. So these were the teams that we started with. We started with just the 2 teams. So you'll see that they have a nice progression of jam-packed sprints, pretty sparse sprints. These teams at the bottom, they were pretty darn new. So it's a little less packed towards the front end and pretty consistent sizing and all those things, but that's okay. Teams were figuring that out. So Agile Biker, my response to your question is that Agile does not remove the need to have well thought out work. What Agile does that is different than Waterfall is that you don't try and have all of the work well thought out. You continuously think out the work that you need to be doing. One of the key mind explosions that I had was that when I joined Teradata, if you've listened to the podcast, you may have heard me talk about this. Bob and I were hired to help transform that organization from very waterfall to as agile as possible. And I saw on the shelves of all the engineers and all the product owners these 3-inch binders. And I just asked, hey, what is that? And the product owner explained that that's the requirement and design document that we do in the first 3 months of the year. So the team would, for 3 months, define the requirements, build out the design of everything that they were going to build for that year. I joined in November. Yes, oh, cool. So when was the last time you opened that? And the instant response was, oh, we never do. It's just part of the process, the thing that we have to do. But we just know that that's not accurate anymore because we've learned so much. So that's all we're trying to do. That's why I do this monthly as opposed to once a quarter, because in my brain, in my mind, I don't think it's realistic to expect any group of people. Let's go back and say this leftmost sprint is January 1st. That the stuff you think you're going to do by the end of March, that there's nothing you're going to learn in the coming sprints that would inform you how to do those things in a more effective way. That's why I choose to put in an additional spin on the traditional safe BRP and do it once a month. That allows us to continually refine the work. So that way, by the time it hits the sprint board or the sprint plan, the team's seen it, they understand it, they know how they're going to build it, they have a clear understanding of what they're being asked to build, and they can, with confidence, put those stickies on that board and deliver value to the customers. Okay, so those are the two horizons. The sprint horizon, the BRP horizon, and then this is what I call the roadmap. So the roadmap is broken down by quarters. Each team has their own plans by quarter, and we refine that once a month as well. Now, if you're doing it right, the closest quarters, the nearmost quarters, the quarter that is coming up or at the top, it's annoying. I know this is something I've given this talk at conferences before, and I never realized until I had to stand in front of a group of people and explain what this was, that we have on this BRP board, we have a measurement of time on the x-axis, but on this roadmap, the measurement of time is on the y-axis. I think the thing I blame it on is the shape of the boards. That we always give the time axis the longest length. That's my cop out. That's my cheap cop out. But again, so same thing. The items that are coming up in the next quarter, those rarely changed for us. Why do they rarely change for us? Because we started as a leadership group talking about what are the things we want to build a year from now. As we progress in through time, we continue to review this board and figure out if that makes sense. There were more discoveries. We started to understand, no, we shouldn't do that, or we should actually do this first. So that way, by the time we got to an epic at the top of this board starts to get pulled off and land in these very last sprints in this BRP plan, we knew we should do it. We knew that was the moment we should do that. We discussed it. We understood why it was important, why it was more important than the other things to do. We had clarity around what it meant. Then we gave each team, they had 3 iterations normally of seeing it as a part of a BRP plan to refine it. Then we move down 2 sprints later and we refine it again. Then we refine it again. Then, okay, it's finally time to pull off and put on the sprint plan. So for us, sprint planning became a non-event. This was very important to me because I had been places where sprint planning was a slugfest. I hated it. It was a marathon. It drove me crazy. And I didn't see how it was effective. So I went on this mission to change the way teams planned. And this is the approach that I came up with. Put it in place. It's worked well. It is not easy. Why is it not easy? Let's talk about some of the hurdles we had putting this in place. Teams were terrified that anything they put in these last sprints every month, they were terrified. What if we're wrong? What if we can't actually do that story here? Or that one story becomes 5 stories and we can only do 2 of them in this sprint and then the rest of them have to happen in that next sprint. They were terrified of that. Rightfully so, because of the number of places that they've been where any time that any slice of work was associated with any unit of time, it was weaponized. It was at some point in time, you listed this piece of work associated with this date. People were terrified of that. So what we ended up having to do, and you can't see it, but it's off on the left side of this board. Myself and my peer at the time, so I was the VP of software engineering, the VP of product. We signed a piece of paper saying that this is not a blood oath, that you will not be fired if an item you put way out in sprint +6 doesn't end up exactly in that moment. But the way that we showed people that we were going to iterate on it was we iterated on it. Every month we would refine this. We would reforecast. Initially, we just had to get people to trust us. Over time, we were able to prove that we're going to refine this forecast, provide an updated forecast out to the business, and then it was going to be okay. And there was value in providing this forecast out to the business. Now, I had other leadership battles I had to go and fight in support of the team. There was a peer VP that I was working with that in a weekly leadership meeting pulled up a picture of a BRP board and said, Josh, this sticky here says it was going to be done in sprint 15, and sprint 15 was the state, and it's sprint 15 and it's not done. So I had to have a discussion with that person and explain that one of the things that we're trying to do is provide transparency with everything that we're doing. And we're trying to provide the rest of the business with the most up-to-date information we have on what we're building, when we think it's going to be done, what it's going to look like, all of the things. And that it is not convenient, or that it's convenient for you and unfair for us for you to pull up a picture from 3 months ago and not pull up the associated pictures from the subsequent months when that story became 5 stories as we began to learn and understand that. So, part of my discussion with that person was that I had a goal and desire to be as transparent with the organization as possible about what we're building, when we think it's going to be done, and what we've learned since the last plan. And that if they continue to operate in this way and use old data to weaponize it, again, that's one of my favorite terms because it really does become a weapon, to weaponize those dates against our team, then I wouldn't share that info with them because they had proven that they were not good stewards of the information, and they did not deserve that level of transparency. They were not capable of using it. So that was a very real challenge that I had to have. Oh, the hurricane track. Yes, that is. We have that in here. So yes. So this is why I use refinement and forecast, and why I use the forecast. Like, everybody is perfectly comfortable with understanding storms, especially in the Southeast, especially in North Carolina, where sports teams are named hurricanes. This is something that is very close to everyone's heart. So I use this to try and educate people of this is what we're doing. So by the time it's Thursday at 8 p.m., this cone of uncertainty is going to be much more narrow. Why is it going to be much more narrow? Because we've learned the storm has moved. We've collected more data. So the same thing, the same approach is why we refine this BRP board on a monthly basis. We gather more data. We understand what the storm is doing. We understand the other weather patterns that will affect the storm. We understand all of the variables that are in place for the teams to deliver all this work, and we reforecast. So that's the approach that we take. I've had real success with this. It makes sense. It is difficult. Our BRP, or as you're referring to it as a PI board, the first ones are hard. They're difficult. They take like 3 hours. Everybody gets frustrated. Everybody gets angry. But we found that after a year, as I just started to talk to engineers, they really came to understand and value the process of this continual refinement of work. I even threw out, maybe we don't do this anymore. And the team said, no, we actually value it. It's important to us to be able to break things down. So it will be met with resistance if you put this approach in place. It will be, and it will be difficult. And the first ones will feel like an absolute battle. But over time, the team starts to understand the value of continually breaking down that work. The business begins to see the value because guess what? The team has allocated the time, effort, and energy to begin to break down work well beyond the time in which they're going to do it. Now, one of the challenges that you may have, that's why this quarterly planning board is so important, is that you have your own little tornado of work that comes into these sprints +5 and +6 that just keeps changing. So the team does some great work to break things down, and then the next BRP plan comes. And you're like, oh, hey, that work that you refined, we don't want to do that. So then they start to lose value. They start to believe that maybe this is a waste of time. So one of the things that is really important is that you dedicate time, effort, and energy to having the next items, the next epics refined well, that you know that that's the next thing that you want the team to build. There's a guaranteed way to quickly have the team lose belief in the value that this process provides, is to have these sprints +5 and +6 be this like never-ending swirl of churn and pain, because they refine it, it goes away, they got to refine something else, and that just creates pain and suffering. Nobody likes that. Nobody wants that. You have to be diligent about this quarterly forecast. Same thing is true. If you don't do this BRP well, guess what? Your sprint plans aren't going to be super smooth. You're not going to get to that magical predictability. So it all falls in line with, if you do this well, if you do the quarterly forecast well, you do it often, you're confident in it, you're going to have misses, right? I'm not suggesting you're going to be perfect. But if 90% of the time, the stuff you bring to the team, you introduce to them as this is the next thing for the BRP board. If 90% of the time that actually continues and makes it all the way to the sprint board, you're fine. You're going to have misses, right? Everybody understands that. There's new discoveries, there's things happen. But if that's this continual churn of pain, you've lost the team. You have devalued this process, which in turn made sprint planning even harder. And they feel that pain every 2 weeks. When they feel that pain, they start thinking back, how did we get here? And it's because product has not done a good job of having their next epic items well refined, and it just flows downhill. Okay. That is my view on the 3 horizons of planning. I'd be happy to hear what other people like, what they don't like, what they would do differently, what they do differently, how they would change it, or if you have any questions about why, let me know. Okay, I'm going to go back to the regular view. Cool. So that's the approach that I've taken. Guess what? You got like a little mini conference thing that you didn't have to spend like $1,400 for. I've given that talk at a couple of conferences. So there you go, freebie. Ooh, good questions. How did I overcome the objections and hesitations of the team planning? Actually, there was a historical monumental moment in that first BRP planning session. I had Bob in. Bob helped introduce the concept. I supported everything he was saying. The team was just terrified, right? And I understood, having been in their shoes, they were terrified around, is this going to be held against me? What are we going to do? And we had our senior most engineer had just had enough. He had had enough of the teams complaining. And he just stood up and said, listen, we can stop complaining, or we can just give it a try. Let's just try this damn thing. And it was a glass whiteboard, and he took his hand and he slapped the board, and he had a wedding ring on, and so he slapped the board. It made a very distinctive sound, and so everybody was like, okay, let's do it. So that became the norm, that after product stood up and talked about the things that we wanted to add into sprints, +5 or +6, those things that are out there, I would stand up and with my ring hand, I would bang on the glass board like, all right, let's do it. So that was one of those things, was it took a member of the team to have the willingness and guts to say, listen, let's stop complaining and let's just freaking try it. And we did. And it paid off. So having that one insider, having that one member say, let's stop complaining, let's just go give this a shot. That was the thing that got us over the hump. And it was a great moment. It was a fantastic moment. And it lived on and was reenacted every month from there on out. So my favorite Atlassian tools, yes, I love them. They really were only helpful for sprint planning. Yes, for the BRP view, we did have stories in Jira and everything to support that, but we actually use the physical boards to represent that. And over time, in one of the hackathons, actually, I will just go back. Let me switch back. One of the things that became frustrating was that as teams would start to do their BRP planning, imagine we have 5 teams of about 7 people. So we had like 35 people trying to huddle around this board and plan and move stickies and do all that stuff. So in a hackathon, one of the teams built our BRP board, and it was this massive wooden structure with individual whiteboards that represented each square. And they were removable. So what teams would do is they would remove their mini whiteboards, grab them, take them to a conference room, and they had this very nice little beveled edge that allowed them to hang back on the board, and they would hang those little mini whiteboards that represented each sprint in the future for them. They would hang them on these little ledges or on the ledges of their rolling whiteboard, and they would plan that out. They would stack them back up. They would put them back on the board. So we never found a very effective way to virtually recreate that. One of the things that I'm seeing happen with some of the teams I'm working with now, and actually we had some remote teams, they were using real-time whiteboard to recreate the BRP board in a virtual world. And teams I'm working with right now are using a tool called Miro, Miro, to again have a virtual version of this BRP board. So those are ways that we've gotten around some of the things that are lacking in Jira's tooling to make it work for us. Listen, Visceral, I understand we all start like that, and I don't know if you were here for the start, but the one thing that I encourage you to do, sorry if I give everybody a headache and scrolling. So Visceral, have the least amount of process that's needed for you. If you're one team, you might not need everything that we needed as a 5-person tribe, or not as a 5-person, as a 5-team tribe. Again, the same process doesn't work for every group. You may not have the cross team collaboration that we had. Okay. So yeah, so this was this minimum viable bureaucracy. That's a foundational thing that I use to check myself, because I get very excited. I want to build new processes. I want to solve all the world's problems. But in reality, you don't have all the world's problems. You have your problems. You have the things that are wrong. You have the things that you need to fix. And so often, with good intentions, we end up overfixing. So I have MVB in the back of my head to ensure that I can hit the pause button and say, do we really have this problem I'm trying to solve? So some of the problems that I'm saying that we were solving, you might not have if you're a small team. So this was the balancing act that I always try to keep in place of how do I provide autonomy to teams but ensure that there's alignment across the teams. The 3 horizon planning structure that I was talking about, that's how I ensured the alignment was there. How the teams provided that, they had the autonomy to go and define that. So what I'm discussing might not be appropriate for you. It might be. But I still believe that as a product organization, whoops, stop scrolling for you, sorry. As a product organization, understanding those 3 horizons and providing your engineering teammates with visibility into the future is vital to success within the sprint. It's vital to giving them the ability to see the work that's coming, understand what's being asked of them, try and figure out how they're going to build it. So that way by the time it hits your sprint board, it's not, holy crap, we got to figure that out. Now, one of the most important things, I just had a discussion with somebody the other day, is that if, say I'm leading the product organization. If I'm leading a product organization and I go and I get all of our product managers, product owners, product whatever label you want to put on, to go and have these different views of what we'd like to build. None of that works if there is not engineering capacity to refine this work, to really break it down and understand how we're going to build it. So I view product as responsible for what we're going to build. Engineering is responsible for how we're going to build it. We product could provide the best, these are the things we want to build, but if space is not given for the engineering organization, be it architects or senior engineers or the whole team itself, to break down and understand that work and devise a plan for how they're going to do it, this all falls apart. You've got to have a strong partnership across the board. So that's my view. That's my spiel. I'm not even sure how to spell that word. I feel like I should never use a word that I can't spell. Okay. That was it felt like a conference talk. That's how you would spell that? I feel like it's like SCH. What the Googles had. At least that's how I say it. It doesn't mean that's how it's spelled. Well, well, well. Look at that. There, let's flip over. According to this Google search, we're both right. I don't like that both Agile Biker and I can be right. Not a fan. I don't like that dictionary.com agrees with Agile Biker. I'm not even gonna discuss that. Yeah, we know who's right. The guy that's broadcasting that can click on the link that agrees with him. Oh man. Oh, visceral, my friend. That is one of the biggest traps. Makes things difficult because there's Here's the I will give you my view. I am sure others will jump in with their view. Agile, Scrum, whichever flavor you're doing, it's hard. And I think you'll find that as groups take an apathetic approach to it, what ends up happening is you end up opting out of the hard parts. And the hard parts are kind of the magic generators. That's one of those things that you've got to understand. You've got to fight through that. Like if it was easy, everybody's planning would be fantastic. There wouldn't be podcasts. There wouldn't be people streaming about this. There wouldn't be groups of people taking time out of their day to come and argue about this. It's hard. So yes. There's two things. All of the Twitch doesn't, because I'm not a partner yet. So one of the things why actually let me flip back here. One of the things why this follower goal is important is that as we get to 200 followers, we end up in the next level. So I'm an affiliate on Twitch. Next is a Twitch partner, which means Twitch keeps your broadcasts for longer. So if you look at videos, you'll see that not all of the historical broadcasts are there. I do my best to, let me find my YouTube channel, to save these things off. Actually, if you scroll down below, there should be a link to YouTube and all the videos there. I try and move them over. I've actually talked to Twitch and they've assured me that Agile Biker is not allowed to have a channel. So I think we're safe. Yes. So in reality, Agile Biker, the usually post, the thing that defines whether I post them or not is if I look back and like I felt like I did a good job. Because there's some streams where I'm just like, man, I didn't do a good job. I don't feel like that's worthy content of saving forever. So I just kind of hang my head. I don't export to YouTube. Try and pretend it never happened. Yes, but I will post this one definitely. One of the things I'm thinking about doing is trying to do a little bit better with more social marketing and do some Instagram stuff, like smaller bits and chunks. So yeah, so I will right away get this one moved over to YouTube. And if you do scroll down below the video, you should see a whole content section with links and all these things. I believe YouTube is there. I haven't. Let me get onto my like broadcaster view. Hold please. I can remember what's down there. Yes, so if you scroll down below, there's about me, links to the Discord to continue the conversation. So Visceral, feel free to join in the further discussion there. And there's also a link to our YouTube channel, which is where the version of this will be. I caught that. Thank you, Agile Biker. It is very rare. I didn't want to highlight it because I didn't want to make it uncomfortable for you or for me. We're saying nice things. Like I said, a nice thing about Bob on LinkedIn. That was difficult, but accurate. He's a fantastic dude. Okay. Well, I feel like we crushed that one. Feel good. I'm going to wrap it up. Everyone have a good weekend. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay appropriately social distanced so we can maintain the positive trends. We can maybe see each other someday at a conference or something. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen? So until next week, have a good week. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will chat next week. See ya.